Hello, everyone, and I hope you're having a great day so far. Welcome to our CLPL session this month, Writing Your Own Story, based all around Scotland's oceans. Now, feel free to use the chat function throughout if you have any questions or suggestions or thoughts you'd like to share. And just a reminder that today's session is being recorded and we'll be uploading it later on for those that could not attend the session today. Now, today is possible with thanks to Education Scotland and their Enhancing Learning STEM Fund. It means that we can do these CLPLs for free, reaching out to you. And this is a series that we have going on until March 2023. So we have a collection of different topics, such as writing your own story or how to adapt a storybook, all around different STEM themes like the ocean and climate change as well. So you still have time to sign up for all of these if you enjoyed today's session, and if you came last month as well, you can continue our journey through storytelling in STEM. So you can head to our website to find out more about that. Now, today's session, like I said, is all about Scotland's oceans. Today we're going to be focusing on lots of different things. So we're looking at how storytelling can be delivered and achieve things like the curriculum for excellence, realising the ambition and learning for sustainability. And we'll also look at why Scotland's oceans specifically are a really good topic to cover and how we can engage kids through STEM and our curriculum for this. I'll also be showing you a section of our marine mystery storytelling workshop. It's going to be a little bit different as there's no kids in the room, but I'll be talking you through this on how we do it and how we use the different elements of story writing. And we also have a special guest today with us that will be kicking us off. So before I get into the theory of it all and Scotland's oceans, curriculum for excellence, things like that, and our example, I want to introduce our guest today, Dr. Joanne Vad. She is brilliant. She's a marine biologist and postdoc researcher at the University of Edinburgh, working with our Changing Oceans group. And she is just full of knowledge. So she's here today to share her research, how she got into ocean science, and have a little chat with you. In STEM, it's really important to have role models and people that you can talk about and look up to. And so hopefully she can be one of those for your pupils. So I am going to hand over to her to start off with. We'll do a little chat and then I'll dive into the theory of it. But I'm just going to turn her mic and camera on. Is that all good? Awesome. Hello there. How are you doing today?
Hi, Katrina. I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. It's nice to see you, not in person, but at least through the screen. I'll switch my camera off and I'll hand over to you and you can get today's session started.
Amazing. Could you allow me to share my screen so I can show my slide? Would that be possible?
Yes, I can.
Amazing. Yep.
Perfect. Enjoy.
Thank you. All right, everyone, give me just 2 seconds so I can figure out how to share my screen with you. I am just going to put these slides as full screen. Katrina, please shout if you're not seeing my slides in full screen. If not, I'll just carry on and hopefully this is all working. So hi everyone, I'm Joanne Vad. I'm a researcher at the University of Edinburgh. And today I'm just going to try and give you some perspective from, I guess, an ocean scientist, a marine biologist, about how it's like to work on the deep sea in Scotland. As you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not from around Scotland originally. So I'm Danish and I'm born and raised in France. So I actually started my studies in France. I was really interested in biology from the get-go. So I did an undergraduate and then a postgraduate in Paris in France, just looking at biology and ecology as a subject. So not specifically looking at the marine environment or the deep sea. But then I got the opportunity to do a PhD at Heriot-Watt University here in Edinburgh. and I was looking at oil and gas activities and how they impact a habitat called sponge grounds. And I'll tell you more about these in just a few minutes. And this is really how I got a foot into the deep sea, if you will. And since then, I've just carried on from my PhD, stayed in Scotland, moved over to the University of Edinburgh, where I'm part of the Changing Oceans Research Group. So this is a picture of most of us at the Discover the Deep kind of inauguration event that Dynamic Earth organized a few months back. And we just a group of marine biologists and ecologists really interested in the deep sea. So there's lots of us in the group, and I'm just representing them, I suppose, today. Just to give you a bit of an overview of what I'm going to discuss with you to start with, I'll give you a quick introduction to the deep sea, just so we're all on the same page, talk a bit about the challenges that we have exploring the deep sea. We'll go over some of the habitats that we found down there, and then I'll focus a bit more on my research, give you an idea of what I'm up to in my everyday, tell you what I find interesting about the deep sea research that hopefully will help you engage your own students. And then I have a few helpful resources that I've found interesting about the deep sea, but Dynamic Earth and Katrina will cover that in much more details after my talk as well. So what do we actually mean when we talk about the deep sea? So you might have seen this kind of graph before. I'm just going to get my laser pointer. This basically is a drawing that represents our world's oceans, going from the very shallow tropical coral reefs on one side all the way down to the deep abyss down here. And when we talk about the deep sea, what we mean is basically anything that's below 200 meters deep. The reason why we select this number as our separator is because from 200 meters down, there's no lateral light penetrating the water column. And this has really big implication for the animals that we find in the oceans. So above 200 meters, you get some animals that are able to get their energy from the sun. So this will be algae, this will be coral, etc., etc. Below 200 meters, you don't find these animals or organisms that are able to get direct energy from the sun. So they might consume animals that get their energy from the sun, but they can't use the sun directly. And that's because basically the energy doesn't penetrate the water column. So there's a whole bunch of organisms that live down here, and they're very different from those living at the surface. You might have seen some of these metrics before, but it used to be, as a deep sea scientist, we would say to everyone that we were chatting to, well, we know more about the surface of the moon than we know about our Earth's ocean and about the deep sea. But actually nowadays we can go a bit further, and we can say that we know more about the surface of Mars than we know about the Earth's ocean. So these numbers are the percentage of area mapped. So first for the oceans, about 23%. The moon is mapped to about 98%, so we know the moon quite well. And Mars is about 61% of its surface is mapped. The numbers will differ a bit depending on the resolution that you want to take into account, but the overall idea still stands. So the deep sea is kind of a final frontiers on our planet, really. We really don't know enough about it. So what does that mean in general? Well, the deep sea is a really vast environment, covers about 60% of our Earth's surface. So it's not a small part of our planet. It's really consequent amount of our Earth is deep sea. It holds a whole bunch of species that we know nothing about, that we've not yet discovered. So assessment have shown that about 1 to 2/3 of all species in the sea remain to be discovered. That's about up to 1 million species, and many of those will reside in the deep sea. And actually, when we go and collect some of these animals, and I'll show you in a moment how we do this, a lot of them we actually don't really know what they are and how to classify them. And finally, I do want to highlight that despite the fact that deep sea can appear very remote, they can appear very unknown or very lesser known, human activities do impact these deep sea habitats. So we do have trawling, which is the method used to fish in the deep sea, has very strong impacts on the deep sea habitats. Oil and gas extraction is being done in deep sea habitats, and those also have some strong impacts on the deep sea, and I've studied those a bit more specifically. We found plastics all the way down to the the deep abyss. So plastics is now something that's ubiquitous in our marine ecosystem, including deep sea. And then we also have the impact of climate change and also ocean acidification, which are impacting our whole planet. And that also includes the deep sea. Finally, just want to mention very briefly, I don't have enough time to go into details here, but we are also considering now to run deep sea mining, and this is to acquire rare earth minerals that are used in our batteries and are used in renewable energy infrastructure. So this is not yet done commercially, but is an activity that a lot of countries and companies are looking into. So that will be yet another human activity that will impact the deep sea quite drastically. Right, so we've spoken a bit about what the deep sea is or where it's located, I suppose. How do we actually go and explore it? So the exploring the deep sea, we rely a lot on quite advanced technologies, and the main kind of method that we use is remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs. So these are these kind of large robots you can see here on the slides. Just to give you a sense of scale, this robot is probably about 2 meters high, so they can be quite big. You can get some smaller models. And these remote operated vehicles are equipped with a whole bunch of lights and cameras at the front and at the back. It's also equipped with some manipulators. And the idea is that we take this ROV, we lift it with the crane out into the water from a ship. It gets disconnected from the crane, but you still have a cable that links it back to the ship. So it's not just left off independently. And on board the ship, you have some amazing technicians that are able to drive this ROV, looking at the cameras, get it bound to the seabed, and then with these manipulators go and select some very important samples for us. So you can see here, there's the manipulator just going in to get a soft coral. And with this, we can really go in and pick out specific pieces of the seabed that we would like to look a bit further at. We can also mount a whole bunch of equipment at the front of it. So this is an example from one of our former cruises, where you can see the manipulator kind of handling one of these sampling boxes that we had designed to take specific samples for us. What usually happens on board the ship while this ROV is in the water is all the deep sea biologists get really excited, and we all sit around in a room with lots of screens, and we comment on what we see. And the chief scientist, in this case, this was my line manager, Murray Roberts, the head of the Changing Oceans group, will be in contact with the technician and say, oh, could you go a bit to the left, go pick up that piece of coral, or could you carry on the routes that we had pre-designed with the technicians? So that's kind of the traditional way that we do deep sea exploration, is with these ROVs. However, sometimes we don't have access to this kind of really high-tech equipment, or it might break down while at sea. So we do still rely on nets. And this is actually a technique that has been deployed for, well, 100 years, really. So going back to the very, very first expeditions to the deep sea. And so we have these nets that will scrape the seabed, collect a whole bunch of seabed mud, and we'll then bring this mud to the back of the vessel, have a look at it amongst us, decide how to kind of filter it, and then we'll spend hours and hours sieving through all of this mud to eventually get our samples here. And then these samples will be identified, they'll be preserved, and we can then do all kinds of analysis on these physical samples. So you can see the deep sea is not very well known because it's actually really challenging to go and get our samples. You either need these very fancy robots, or you need these big research vessels that can drag nets across the seabed to try and get physical samples. So it's not an easy task. But when we do manage to go down there, we find some absolutely amazing deep sea habitats, and they have a really wide range. So you have some habitats that are very ephemeral. So these can be from whale skeletons that have fallen, died at the surface, fallen down to the deep sea, and you'll have a whole range of organisms that will feast on these remains. And everything disappears in a few weeks from these carcasses, everything to even to the bones. There's some worms that are evolved to just eat some of these bones that fall from the surface down to the seabed. So these are very ephemeral ecosystems that might change within a few weeks. And then we have things that have been at the seabed, habitats that have been there for centuries. if not longer. So we have some very specific habitats around hydrothermal vents. These are a bit like underwater volcanoes, except that instead of lava, it's hot fluids coming out of them. We also have things like cold seeps. These are a bit more mysterious habitats where you have gases and colder fluids coming out of the rocks, and there's a whole bunch of animals that evolved to feed on these fluids. And then we have just long-lived, slow-growing corals that can take all kinds of weird shapes and forms. So these are really amazing habitats to look at, and there's a whole range of them, so I can't go into all of them. So I've just chosen two, which are focused around Scottish waters. So the first one is cold water coral reefs. Here you have a picture of what a cold water coral reef looks like. So you might think, oh, it's actually quite close to a tropical one, and I can see why. You have these corals on the seabed, completely covering the seabed, and some other animals that live amongst them. The big difference is that these corals, as I mentioned earlier, they can't rely on the sunlight to feed. So they have kind of evolved a bit differently. They've evolved to get much larger tentacles, and you can see them here on this picture. And these tentacles will just grab any food that's in the water column and bring it to the mouth, which is at the center. So these are just little mouths with some weird looking hands, just kind of grabbing whatever's in the water and bringing it to the coral to feed. But just as your tropical coral reefs, these can grow and make really large structures. And it's these very big structures, these reefs that create a habitat for animals. So this can range from fish. This is a really big ling that we found in one of our coral reefs footage, but it can also be nursery ground. So here you have a shark egg case on a piece of coral. So that means that if the coral reef disappears or deteriorates, then you also lose the nursing ground and potentially the species for this, in this case of sharks. So they're very important habitats. And you also have some weird and wonderful animals living on there. So here you can see some coral covered in anemones. So these are the little orange mouths, looks a little bit like a coral, but it's softer in its at its core. And then this crab, which is called a carrier crab. That's personally my favorite. Basically, it uses its back two legs to carry either a piece of sponge here or a piece of soft coral on the other image to camouflage itself, is what we think. And so they just walk around with a little sponge or coral backpack at the back while they wander around the coral and just eats on whatever debris they can find on the coral. So all kinds of weird and wonderful animals live on these things. The last picture on my slide is just to show you that these corals can sometimes appear in places that we don't necessarily think of. So this is actually a picture from the North Sea. These pillars that you can see at the back are legs from an oil platform. And you can see that there's some coral colonies that have just started growing there. And this has really created a whole ecosystem on this platform. So you have now fish and anemones and other animals that are just starting colonizing this area because the corals are really creating this habitat for them. It's not just in the North Sea that we find these. So Scotland has some pretty amazing cold water coral reef in its water. So one of the best known is the Mingley Reef Complex. It's located just here, just south of the Hebrides. Actually, technically, this isn't a deep sea habitat because it's actually not necessarily below the 200-meter mark, but it's cold water, or the waters there are able to kind of support this habitat nevertheless. So cold water coral reef rather than deep sea coral reef, that's just a small subtle difference here. But you can see that within the Mingley Reef Complex, these are some what we call bathymetry figures. So it just shows you the depth of the region. And you see that we have these kind of ridge-like structures in the region. And all of these have corals growing on them. And just to give you a bit of a sense of scale, if I just zoom in on this Mingley 1 area, this is this figure here, you can see that this is several kilometers long. And this will be covered in coral reef. So it can really be a large subset of the seabed that are covered in these reefs. Now, my second example of a habitat, a deep sea habitat that is relevant for Scotland, are deep sea sponge grounds. So these are lesser known than cold water coral reef, even within the deep sea research community. But I hold a very special place in my heart because I did my PhD on them. So sponges are animals that filter the water and get their food from the seawater that they filter. They can really take all kinds of shapes and forms. So from these round, weird-looking sponges that you see here to these much bigger, strange forming kind of lumps in the seabed. But you can also have some very delicate branching sponges, some fan-shaped sponges, some encrusting sponges, all the way to this little guy here that looks like a complete alien. That's actually called a carnivorous sponge. It doesn't filter the water, but it just eats whatever falls onto its surface. And so it just looks completely strange to us, but it is a sponge, and it does, when it's present in high enough concentration in an area, it creates a habitat just like a coral reef does. So here you can see on this picture a bunch of branching sponges, and you can see that on the same picture we have a crab, we have a shrimp here, we have a snail, and we have a fish, all kind of living around these sponge grounds. This is another example of this, where you have both a fish and some sea anemones colonizing the spaces around these weird-looking little branching sponges. Now, sponges are wonderful for all kinds of ways. They are one of the first type of multicellular organism that's appeared on planet Earth and that is still present on our planet. So these sponges have been on our planet for millions of years. And they're really, really good at kind of are resilient. So if you cut a sponge in two, it will regrow in two different sponges. They don't have any kind of tissue, so they don't have a heart and a nervous system the same way we do. They're just kind of a bunch of cells organized in a mass, and they're really good at filtering water. So it's a very strange animal for us to study because we can't really do many analogies in terms of how it functions, but it's a really important organism nevertheless, and it creates really, really nice habitats. Again, in Scotland, we have some amazing sponge grounds. So one area that's famous for it is this area between the north of the Shetland Islands, so between Shetland and the Faroese, which will be up here on the map. It's called the Faroe Shetland Channel Sponge Belt Marine Protected Area. It's quite a mouthful, but this whole region is basically protected because it holds some amazing sponge grounds. Just a little anecdote, back in the days, the fishermen that would fish in these areas would actually call it cheesy grounds because it does look like little pieces of cheese are just colonizing everywhere on the seabed. I do want to highlight that this region is also where we produce some oil. So we have several oil fields that are in production within the marine protected area. So this is a really good example to show you how we have some amazing deep sea habitats that are located very close to human activities. And so it's super important that we study these environments and we try and understand what our impacts are on these habitats. Now, what do I actually do? Well, I'm really fascinated by how we engage with or interact with marine habitats. So I specifically want to understand how open water and deep sea ecosystem are impacted by human activities and climate change. I do this through three different ways. I look at deep sea image analysis recorded with these remotely operated vehicles I showed you. I do some experiments in the lab, and often I use shallow water animals as a model for the deep sea ones because they're very tricky to get back into the lab alive in a good enough condition. And then lastly, I also look at some time series data. Now, time series is just a very fancy word to say that we have data that we've collected over time in a very similar fashion and over the same location. And so we can try and see how things have changed over time. Give three very short examples. Deep sea image analysis. This is a study that we did actually from Mingle Reef Complex. We took some pictures of our coral colonies, and we wanted to measure how much of a colony is living. And this is the white upper part of your colony, and which part of it is just dead skeleton. And this is the dark part here on your image. Now, this dark part, we call it dead, but it's still very important to the coral. It's just the way the colony kind of grows. It grows from small to outwards. And so you have this living part at the surface and the former skeleton kind of supporting it as it grows. And so it's very important for us to understand that how much of it is dead framework, how much of it is living, so we can better understand what a healthy coral colony looks like and what an unhealthy coral colony looks like. So this study showed us that about 2/3 of a healthy coral colony should be dead skeleton, and 1/3 is the living part at the surface. The next thing that I do is experimental work. And as I said, I usually use shallow water specimens to do my work because it's so difficult to get samples from the deep sea. So this is a sponge. It's called the breadcrumb sponge, and it's present everywhere around Scotland. If you go rock pooling at low tide, you might start seeing it very towards the as far out as you can basically go on the rock pools. And it's this really bright yellow, weird looking sponge. So we can cut some of these from their rocks, bring them back to our aquariums, and then we can put them in individual little incubation chambers, we call them. And through these incubation chambers, we can filter all kinds of water and chemicals to see how they react to chemicals. So this is the closest I get to looking like a mad scientist in the lab. We do these weird looking experiments with wires coming out of everywhere. And these are usually conducted in a cold room. So think of a walk-in fridge, probably about 5 to 10 degrees. So most of the time when I do these experiments, I look like this. Basically, I have my hat on, big overalls on, just to keep warm while we're doing our measurements. And this is just an image showing you some of the measurements we can go. We have some fancy equipment to go and measure specifically how a sponge is reacting to a chemical. So through this kind of work, we've shown that sponges are very sensitive to oil. And so if there were to be an oil spill in the Faroe Shetland Channel, we would run into some trouble with losing some of the deep sea sponge habitats that are up there. Finally, I mentioned to you time series analysis. Now, this is really difficult to show you a cool image of on these slides, but I did want to mention them because it's a big part of my work. So our colleagues in Canada, since 1999, have been collected zooplankton. These are tiny, tiny animals that live in the water column through these nets. And with this massive data set, we can basically look at what species are increasing in abundance over time, what species are decreasing. And what we find is that we get more of these weird looking jelly-like plankton and less of these kind of shrimp-like plankton in our water column. And these changes that happen near the surface of the water will have big repercussion for our deep sea because they rely on what's coming from the surface down to them. So we're now looking more at this data set, but we're finding really significant shifts linked to our increase in seawater temperature. Now that I've kind of given you an overview of what it's like to be a deep sea scientist, I just want to finish the talk with what I find interesting about my work. This was something that I was kind of asked to think about and reflect upon when I was invited to give this talk. Now, I spent quite a bit of time actually thinking about this, and I guess the idea is maybe how can we use that interest to engage others? That's kind of the logic here. Now, when I was a little girl, I was actually completely obsessed with adventure books and movies. Some of these are completely cheesy now, I do realize that. They're not particularly good books or particularly good movies, but I have to say, I think I got into marine biology because I wanted to become some sort of marine Indiana Jones, basically. And to a certain extent, that is part of my work. We do sometimes get to go on some incredible expeditions and try out some really fun things. This is from a cruise that I did in 2019 with a colleague. You had to be helicoptered out to the ship. So we had to wear these survival suits. We picked up some pretty amazing deep sea equipment on our way that stayed on the seabed for about a year. So we were really pleased when we saw it coming back up to the surface. And we were on board a Canadian Coast Guard vessel that was actually an icebreaker. So this was up in the Arctic, and the last few weeks of our journey, we actually had to break ice to get back to our harbor. Obviously, when you go through these kind of expeditions, it's, beyond the science, it's just an amazing life experience. But then I thought some more, and actually this is not very helpful to you because, well, you can't bring your students out on a research vessel. And to be honest, it's very rare that I get to go on these research vessels. This was my last one, and that was in 2019. So I thought a bit some more, and I thought, well, if I can't get to the deep sea, at least just being out in nature near the sea is really, really fun. These are some pictures of some field work that we've done with our master students. And, you know, whether it rains or shine, we're always really happy to be near the water. But even this is actually a very, very small amount of my research time. Most of my time by far, I actually look a bit more like this, spent hours and hours in front of my computer trying to make sense of all of this data that's been collected, trying to write down some of my results. So, and this is basically the kind of data sets that I'm looking at. So I look at these very complicated graphs and I try to come out with some sort of message that can be understood by others. So a lot of time just kind of thinking, scratching my head and so on. But I would say that even with my time spent looking at complex data, I think the thing that I really enjoy is that I still feel like it's a bit like an adventure. I still have to figure out a puzzle and communicate that to others. So I guess my take-home message is, if you are to try and engage others about the deep sea, try and relate this sense of adventure. It is, after all, like a great unknown, and that's, you know, kind of a cool thing to look at. Very quickly, because I know the team at Dynamic Earth will go into this much more than me, and they're much better at it than me, but I just listed on my slide 3 main places where you might be able to get some resources that discuss the deep sea. These might be a bit too or designed for older pupils than the ones that you're teaching, but I put them in there anyway. You can have a look. Atlas is a former project that we ran with Dynamic Earth as a partner, and they've designed some amazing educational packs, some coloring pages that are with augmented reality, some quizzes, etc., etc. You can go have a look on the website. There'll be, everything is just there in Legacy, is completely free for you to use. Ifremer, which is the French kind of marine research institute, has also come out with a deep sea spy. They even have an online game when you can go and annotate deep sea images. So have a look at that if you want to have a bit of fun. And then finally, there's a journal that's called Frontier for Your Mind, which is written for kids and edited by kids. This is for older kids, but if you are interested, have a look. It's broader than the deep sea. It includes the last edition, I think, was written by Nobel Prize winners. So it's some really cool science being explained at a very easy level. So that can be of interest maybe as well. And with that, I think I'll stop talking, and hopefully there's time for some questions maybe at the end if anything wasn't clear.
Thank you so much for that. I'll make sure we have any questions in the chat to pass them on. That was all fascinating. It's so lovely to learn that Scotland's deep seas are filled with life and colour. A great way to start us off today. And your research sounds really interesting, and your boat trips sound really fun. I'm very jealous of those. So thank you again for sharing your knowledge. And like I said earlier, role models in STEM are really important. You know, yours was Indiana Jones, and now you are the Indiana Jones of marine world. So hopefully some of our attendees can tell their pupils about you. But yeah, just giving us an insight into your work and sharing your passion has been really great today. So hopefully we can inspire some more ocean lovers in the future. So yeah, thank you so much for being here today. And yeah, if you have any questions, feel free to pop them into the chat and head on to that. So thank you so much. That was Dr. Joanne Vad, everybody. Thank you. I feel like I should give you an applause. I think we have someone typing actually at the moment. Ooh, plankton research resources.
I'll have a quick look. I can't think of anything specific just now, but let me have a think. I might come up with something. There is more about because it's a bit more shallow water. There should be some resources out there. So I'll have a quick think and come back to you. I might post something on the chat in a moment.
That's no problem.
Thought it through.
I know that Newcastle Dove Marine Lab, they do quite a lot of plankton research, so they might be a good point of call as well. So yeah, awesome. Okay, thank you so much. So that was a great way to start our session. We're now going to dive into the theory of storytelling and the ocean. So we're going to get to the nitty-gritty of curriculum of excellence, realizing the ambition, and all the things that you can use the fascinating ocean as we found there for it. So I'm going to share my screen again. I'm going to pop this up for you. And go, I'm just going to load it all up here. So like I said, we're going to move on to the theory side of things. And then once we've done this, it's just uploading at the moment. I'll give you an example of one of our storytelling sessions that we do here. And we're going to have some protected time as well, just to kind of kick a few ideas about yourself. You can do this by yourself, or you can share them in the chat. Today's all about how to write an effective story. So instead of adapting a book or getting something else, this is how you can write one yourself for your kids on any of the topics that you want. Sorry, it's still loading. It's being very slow. And my background also comes from marine biology, so I'm very passionate about the ocean. So I'm very excited to be showing you how you can use the ocean as STEM and curriculum for excellence. And especially here in Scotland, I think sometimes we forget we are an island nation. The furthest point from the sea here in Scotland is only 2 hours away. So we always have that coast and we heavily rely on it. And when my PowerPoint does upload, I'll show you some pictures, and we have a short video of all the different resources that we get from the sea here in Scotland. And just the UK in general, we heavily rely on that ocean. And so it's really important for us to protect it and to understand our connection with it. And this can be defined as ocean literacy. So we'll be talking a little bit about ocean literacy and how you can help your kids become ocean literate. From a very young age, it's important to understand these kinds of things. So it doesn't matter what age you are. Here we go. We are up and running. So it skipped through. I'll just pass through these bits. Okay, so here we have a Google Earth picture of Scotland, so you can just show just how much ocean we're surrounded by. Now, the really fascinating thing about Scotland is that its oceans that it's responsible for, its EEZ, is actually 6 times greater than its land mass. So our seas are literally bigger than our land mass. So Scotland is more of a sea than it is a land. And all of this is what we need to keep protected and use sustainably as well. So I'm going to show you a video from the Scottish Environment Link, and this just highlights some of the importance of how we're connected to the sea and what we're doing to it. So I play this now. Oh, let me get rid of that for you. Okay, then I know some of you had a little issue with that video, so I've posted the link on YouTube there. But it was just highlighting how important our oceans are, how in Scotland we get lots of things like energy, fish, tourism, and other kinds of resources from our ocean, and how we're impacting it as well through climate change and unsustainable use. So you can have a little look at that link on YouTube if you didn't get to see it on the screen. Apologies for that. It was just to highlight here in Scotland how important the ocean is. And like I mentioned earlier, we're talking about ocean literacy. And there are three main qualities of an ocean literate person. So you have understanding the importance of the ocean to humankind, talking about it in a meaningful way, and making informed and responsible decisions. And this last one's really important as well, because the generation that you are influencing has a massive impact on our planet. It's going to be their planet in the future. And so it's really important for them to understand how to protect it for when they grow up and how they can move into this world in a better way. So these are really important things to learn. Now, how does ocean literacy combine with you and teaching and being involved in education for early years? This is where we bring into play the curriculum for excellence. So the ocean is clearly very relevant to us. And the curriculum of excellence here in Scotland is designed to give young people the knowledge, skills, and attributes needed for life in the 21st century. And the ocean and its changing forms are obviously very relevant for that. Now, it can help them become responsible citizens and effective contributors. These are two of the four fundamental capacities from the curriculum of excellence. And protecting our planet and living in harmony with nature instead of taking advantage for it is vital for them to succeed in our changing world. So they have to understand our ocean and our connection in order to be those good citizens and to live in the 21st century. So it covers a lot of science points, topical science, as you can see on our screen here. But it also covers some social studies as well. So like you can see here as well. So I'll give you a second to look through those. So when talking about topical science, the ocean is a great thing to talk about here in Scotland, and it brings up a lot of social studies of how we use the environment and how we can help the environment. So you've already ticked off those kind of topics just by talking about the ocean. And that isn't even before introducing storytelling. This is just the ocean. So it is a great thing. And also, it is just really cool. It's fascinating. As you saw from Dr. Joanne Vad's talk there, our seas are filled with life. Even the deep, dark depths aren't lifeless. And so we have this fascinating coast around us that's just really exciting to learn about. There's lots of really cool creatures in there as well. So it's just fun too. Now, if you combine this with storytelling, you can add in lots of literacy and English as well. So you can see on the slide here, again, I'll leave this up for a minute so you can have a read through those points there. But it gets that creative thinking, that questioning in, that making their own decisions as well, and being able to understand characters. And so you're taking this topic and you're making it into this literacy and English as well. So the combination of oceans and storytelling cover quite a few of our curriculum for excellence points here. And the whole point is that we can create a better future for our children. And these are two really good topics to mix together to do that. Now, it's not just our curriculum for excellence. We also have learning for sustainability here in Scotland. So we have, this is really important to us here at Dynamic Earth because it's really important to keep that sustainable learning going. We want kids to grow with the times, and so that when they are older and in the world, they are ready for it. So things like identity and heritage, you like the video said, and like I've mentioned, here in Scotland we are connected to the ocean, whether it's going out for fish and chips or whether it's the weather or walking on the beach. Or if you're inland, it might be something different. But we are very connected. So we've got that sense of identity and heritage and that contact with nature as well, going out and outdoors. I know the ocean is very cold here in Scotland, but it's definitely worth a dip. And if you're brave enough and you snorkel, you can see some great stuff as well. Or if you don't want to get too wet, you can go rock pooling. You can see lots of things there as well. And then our storytelling brings in a bit more of the creativity and play side of things and gets them thinking more. As I'll talk about later on with writing an effective story, you want them to be questioning you and joining in and using that critical thinking. And then we've got protecting biodiversity as well. So we want to protect our ocean and all of the amazing things it gives us and all the amazing things that live in there as well. So the ocean and storytelling also tick off a whole lot of these learning for sustainability as well. So it seems like a match made in heaven. Now, for younger years, we have the realizing the ambition. And now we're going to focus a little bit more on the storytelling and how to write an effective story in relation to realizing the ambition. So this is another significant part of the National Practice Guidance. If you haven't already seen it, it is a very long document, but it explores a range of interactions, experiences and spaces that we need to provide babies and young children to help them learn and grow. And it highlights the key aspects of what a child needs to get the best out of life. And I keep referring to this as a changing world. And that's because even in my lifetime, I feel like the world has completely changed. And this is what we need to prepare our children for, to fight and protect our planet. So in regards to writing a story, there are certain things that we can do to help engage our children and help improve their learning as well. So what I've got here is, if I just do this, some key points that you want to do while writing a story in order to kind of bring that realizing the ambition or the RTA into your practice. So raising questions throughout the story. I mentioned earlier critical thinking. What you want to do here is offer them a choice. Do they want to go and meet this animal? Do they want to help find something? Should we go in here? And kind of get the children to guide you along that way. So I've put in blue below the different RTA points that it meets and how this part of your story can meet those. So we want to believe that they have a choice and they can think about the decisions that they're making. Then we have combining elements of realism and fairy tales. Now, this essentially means building a story that is magical and enticing, but not too unrealistic. Something that they can still relate to. You don't want them to disengage because it's too out there. We do a workshop where we talk about a little girl who travels to the moon and she wakes up, she falls asleep and she wakes up and she's on a rocket and she travels to space, goes to the moon, comes back, falls asleep and wakes up back in her bed again. And then she finds a piece of the moon that she's collected. And this leaves this kind of sense of did she, didn't she? Did she actually go to the moon? Did she not? And so you've got this kind of element of magical going to the moon, but also that realism of, oh, maybe I could do that. And it's this balance that you want to try and get to try and keep those kids engaged. It's kind of awe-inspiring, but not unreachable. Then we have putting time and effort into dress setting. So it's really important for visual cues, noise as well, this kind of multi-sensory vibe. So always put effort into dress setting. We have all sorts of blankets, cargo nets are a great one as well, cuddly toys. They are a game changer. And things like lights, music, if you could have coloured lights as well, trying to recreate that atmosphere. If you're going for a rainforest story, you want to have cargo nets and rainforest animals and greens and maybe jungle noises. If you're going for the ocean, you'll want blue things and maybe some waves going. And it's just creating that element that they're surrounded. It's not just you, everything, all their senses are being triggered. So this here is a really important part. So not only writing the story, but thinking about how the backdrop goes along with it. Then we have creating characters and storylines they can imitate. Now, by this, what we mean is if you create an animal that they might be able to follow, storylines like something creeping in, so you can do footstep noises. We do a volcano exploding, so we could do rumbling together. In our ocean ones, we go under the sea, swimming, or making different animal noises, like I said. So this is just creating something that they can join in with. So you can get your character to go swimming and get everyone to swim. So they're using their actions, not just their mind. So when creating storylines, think of how you can make it more animated. It's really important to not kind of lose that. It's thought that on average, people only pay attention for around 6 minutes. So if you want your kids engaged, you need to make sure that they're actually engaged. And this is a really easy way of doing that. Just getting them to join along with you in any trips that you're doing. And it's also just loads of fun as well, this one. Incorporating songs and dance. You don't have to be a songwriter or a professional dancer for this. A lot of the time we use nursery rhymes and change the lyrics. Sometimes they don't quite sound the same and we don't quite get the right amount of beats, but it works. So when you're incorporating songs and dance and getting them to act around like things, again, you're getting them up and engaged and part of the story. So they don't feel like they're being told a story, they feel like they're in it. And that's kind of the main aim here. So for our rainforest shop, when we're teaching them about bugs, we do head, thorax, abdomen instead of head, shoulders, knees and toes. Like I said, doesn't have the quite beats, but we get them all up, doing it, pointing to the body parts. And it's just a really simple thing to do, changing the words of nursery rhymes. They all know the tune then, and it's a good way to get them up and dancing around. So this is quite a little fun one. And if you don't feel like you're very creative on that side, if you go to YouTube, there are hundreds of songs about all sorts of things, loads of ocean ones that you can look at as well, and incorporate them into it. If you don't feel confident enough making your own song or dance, YouTube is your friend. And then the last of this one is using gender neutral names and pronouns. A massive thing of the RTA is how children at such a young age are influenced by what they can and can't do from what they see. And like I keep saying, this role models is really important. If you use a boy's name, you might exclude all the girls, vice versa. And when you're using a human character, try not to give detail. Don't give any looks or anything, because we don't want to exclude anyone. So it's really important to keep it nice and light, using gender neutral names and not kind of making sure that you're not excluding anybody or anyone from anywhere. It's really important because from a young age, as a woman myself, there's things that you think you can't do simply because society looks like you can't do them. And so it's really important that we start as young as possible, showing them that they can be whatever they want to be and do whatever they want, no matter where they come from or what gender they are. So this one here is a really good one to stopping that stereotypes right from the very beginning there. So here on the screen, we have quite a few tips on how to write an effective story and how these tie in with realizing the ambition there. Now, what I'd like you to do is I'm going to give you 5 minutes, and I'd like you to come up with a little story of your own, brownie points if it's ocean themed, a simple plot, maybe a character, a couple of activities if you want, just something really brief. You don't have to share it with us. If you want to, you can. If you have any ideas or questions, feel free to ask. If you'd rather do this anonymous, that's fine. This is just to get you thinking about maybe some ideas that you've got in your head and using some of the things that we looked at here. If you can maybe incorporate some stuff like that. So nothing big, but just 5 minutes of reflection on what we've talked about and how you might be able to do this. Once we've done that, I'm going to do a quick talk through of our workshop, our Ocean One Marine Mysteries, and then we'll come back for another 5 minutes to work on your ideas to see if we can elevate them or if there's any things that you liked about ours or any improvements or anything like that that we can share as well. So I'm going to turn my screen off, but I will be on the chat function, and I'm going to give you 5 minutes just to take it all in because I've given you so much knowledge, and just have a moment to try and think of those storylines that you can. So I will pop this on here. and switch my camera off. Okay then. So, oh, if I can change this. There we go. So I hope you managed to get a few little details in there. If you do want to share anything, I'd love to hear what you came up with. It was lovely to see you, Katie, and we will be sharing this online as well. Oh, there we go, fisherman that loses some gear. You, the tidal cycle story, I like that. Amazing, yeah. So these are really great ideas. Something simple like things going missing are really good. Food chain's really important as well. Meeting lots of different characters is really helpful when it comes to this because you can learn all about different adaptations. These are really good story ideas. Thank you so much. Yeah, exploring different habitats, that seagrass one there as well. This is a really good one, going exploring animals finding themselves. Are really good ones there. So it's nice to see some good story ideas going on there. I think your pupils, your kids are gonna have a great time if you come up with some of those. Oh, sorry, I've lost here. Oh, wow. That's really cool that you know about the sea sponges too. So, oh, perfect, Shetland. So you definitely rely on the ocean. I'm sure you get out there a lot as well. That's really cool. So it's nice to see that you've kind of stepped into this. And storytelling is a really fun thing to do as well. We absolutely love it here, getting all the kids excited about the ocean through fun stories. So I've just got up on screen a couple of other things that we always like to add in that aren't directly RTA related, but things like hands-on activities are always really fun. Or if you find it too hard to incorporate these into your story, we do sometimes tell a story and then do things like object handling at the end as well. So we have our dinosaur storytelling, we tell a story about some dinosaurs, and at the end they get to handle some fossils. So there's a balance between this as well, and things like simple plots and like I've seen in some of your ideas there, a variety of places and characters just to widen their experience. So there's so much you can do with storytelling, and I feel like you'll have it all already on the go. So that's really good to see. So I thought I would show you our Marine Mysteries workshop. Now this is going to be a little bit tricky because usually I'm sat on a cushion on the floor with 20 children in front of me in our classrooms where we have coloured lights and music on and a PowerPoint. So it's going to be a bit weird online. But I thought I'd talk you through our story and how we incorporate all of these elements and how you can kind of feature them in your own. So our Marine Mysteries here is our ocean workshop. So this is for early years and P1 to 3 as well. So it's quite adaptable. So our story is all about Charlie. Charlie has lived in this beach house their whole entire life, and they absolutely love it. They love going on adventures and exploring their area. And we always get children to point out what they can see. What can you see in Charlie's house and around Charlie's backyard as well? So there's some creatures on there our kids would recognise. Things like crabs and starfish. So this is a really good way just to get them to shout out everything they can see here. And Charlie really loves going rock pooling. So Charlie loves collecting things and looking at stuff, and they have a treasure chest that they keep all of their favourite things in. So we have a treasure chest that we show our children here, and inside it we have loads of different shells, and we can pass out these shells so they get to feel them and sniff them and look at them. And there's just loads of different kinds of shells, different shapes and sizes in here for our kids to look at. And obviously being in a treasure chest, it's very exciting. So Charlie has this treasure chest that keeps all of their favourite things in. But as Charlie was going through the treasure chest, they realised they were missing their most favourite thing of all. They were missing a bracelet that they had found. Now, this was a silver bracelet, and on it, it said C.W. Thompson. Now, Charlie didn't know what that was stood for, but Charlie loved the silver bracelet and kept it with them at all times, but they must have lost it while they were out adventuring. So would you like to help find it? What do you reckon? Do you think we can find the bracelet? I think we can find the bracelet. So we get the kids to put back all of our things, and we are going to go on an adventure looking for Charlie's bracelet. Now, like I said, Charlie loved to go rock pooling. So the first place they thought to look was in the rock pools. Maybe they dropped it while they were rock pooling. So these are the rock pools near Charlie's house. What animals can we see in the rock pools? There's lots of familiar faces, maybe some unfamiliar faces as well. Now, our room would be set up with lots of lights and music playing as well at this point. And what we do is we are going to have an explore of the rock pools. So who is brave enough to go for an explore of our rock pools? Now, our rock pools look a little bit different. So you can do this with bowls and stuff, but what we have are these boxes that you can see here, and these would be lined up on a table, and the kids will come up and they get to put their hands in the box and try and figure out what they're feeling. So this is just one of these pool ones, so they're like this. A little bit of set decor on the top there. This would also have other stuff around it, but like I said, it's very weird online. And then inside we pop things in it. So really simple boxes that they can have a little feel about and see what they find in the rock pools. Now, some of the stuff we have in them are anemones. So we have this kind of feely thing here. We have a very bumpy starfish that goes in one of them, so they can feel all these bumps. The idea of this one is they feel the 5 arms of our starfish. We have a little hermit crab in the other one there. So you can feel the little crab's pincers and the shell there as well. And last but not least, we have some gooey little gobies. These are just fishing bait things, so they're a bit sticky and kind of gooey as well. So we pop these in our boxes and we get the kids to line up and put their hands in and see what they can find and help Charlie explore the rock pools. And remember, they're looking for a bracelet as well, so they're feeling for that bracelet too. Now, the bracelet is not in there, so Charlie has a think about where they went next, and maybe they dropped it there. And it turns out Charlie went on a fishing trip with their family. So maybe they dropped it in the ocean while they were fishing. So we are going to move on to our fishing thing. Now, Charlie lives near the beach, and the beach can be a little bit smelly sometimes, but Charlie loves the smell of the house, the beach, and the ocean. And we want the kids to find out what it smells like too. So for this, we have little smell pots that we pass around. They're literally little pots that we have cotton wool and some scents that we bought on. There's things like ocean breeze, then there's things like fish, and there's also some seaweed ones. Some of them are terrible smells, and the idea is that the kids can give them a big sniff. They always sniff too hard and go, bleh, and it gets that immersive reaction. So we pass out the sniff pots like they're going on this journey with Charlie here. So back to our boat here. As you can see, Charlie is up there fishing. We've got some seagulls swooping around. And for this activity here, to help Charlie find the bracelet, we're going to go actual fishing. And so what we have here, again, this is really easy to get hold of. So a lot of our activities you can get online. We have a fishing game. And this one, we get them into groups. And as you can see, there is a box full of fish here. We've got things like this. We've got some sharks in here. We have some crabs, some other kinds of fish there, some starfish as well. And our little rods here. And what we do is we go fishing. So you just dip it in, try and find it, and lift it up. So all the kids get a go at collecting as many of the fish that they can. This is just a really simple activity that you can just box up and put on the side ready for them. It doesn't take any sort of sorting or anything. You just buy it as it is. And it means that they can have and explore fishing. So they all go fishing looking for the bracelet, but unfortunately they can't find it. So what they do is they have to dive deeper because we can only fish in the top layer. Now, the top layer is only about 200 meters. Like Dr. Joanne Vad said, after that, it's the deep, dark sea. And so humans can't actually go there by themselves. They need things like ROVs. Now, Charlie doesn't have an ROV, but Charlie's parents are engineers, and they have designed a magical helmet that if Charlie puts it on, they can go down into the deep sea. And this is where our element of fairy tale comes into it. So he doesn't need a big expensive robot. He has this magical helmet that his family have created. And we actually have a little mini one that we can put on as well. You can see it in the picture here too. So we get a very good volunteer to pop on that helmet and head off into the ocean. So first of all, they dive through our sunlit layer, and you can see here some of the animals that they find. So again, we get the kids to shout out what they can see on the screen there if they recognize any of them. These are all surrounded them. We've got our blue lights on here at the moment. And then we talk about going deeper and darker. Now, for this activity, we're doing a little bit about communication. So if Charlie wants to go do the deep, dark sea, he's going to need a way to talk to the people back on the boat to make sure that he's safe, because he doesn't want to get lost in the deep, dark sea. So he's got a special helmet, and he needs some sort of way of communicating with our captain. So we allocate someone to be a captain. So we have a captain on one side and we have Charlie on the other side, another volunteer. And the way we do it is we get the children to be a rope. So they all have to stand up in a line holding hands, and they try and communicate kind of like Chinese whisper style to each other to let Charlie know he's okay. So if Charlie's okay, he does one tug on the rope, and that is one squeeze of the hand. So each kid has to pass a squeeze of the hand to the sailor from Charlie. Now 2 means that he's coming up, and 5 means he's in trouble. So what we do is we get them to practice passing the squeeze on, whether it's 1 squeeze, 2 squeezes, or 5. And then at the end, someone whispers how many Charlie should do, and they pass that on to the captain. And this is a way of getting them up and about, moving onto their feet so they're not sat around. And also it's quite funny because like Chinese whispers, they always get it mixed up and get it wrong. So now Charlie has good communications with the boats. He can start going deeper and darker. So we head into the deep, dark sea. And as he goes deeper and deeper, it gets darker. But he still couldn't see the bracelet, and he was starting to not be able to see anything. Now at this point, we'd switch the lights off, and the room starts to get darker. And Charlie's starting to get scared, and he's a bit worried, and he doesn't know what he's going to do. So he gets out his torch, and he shines his torch around. He can't see anything. And so he's getting really scared at this point. And then suddenly a light appears. And then a few more lights appear as well. And Charlie is seeing lights from creatures in the sea around him. And he thinks, I could ask these creatures to help me find the bracelet. And so what he does is he uses that light to help him see if he can find the bracelet. Now, creatures in the deep sea can take light, artificial light that we are shining on them, and they can give it back to us. We call this biofluorescence. And we have a really cool video that we show them of biofluorescence happening in the deep sea. So I'm just going to show that to you now and switch my camera off. So this is an extremely cool video to show them if you can get any sorts of videos to show them. It's really a good way of kind of getting them to understand, because sometimes it's hard to understand what these things mean. So we have our biofluorescence there. Now, as Charlie saw all these animals start to light up, they could see more. And as they looked down, they noticed they were getting really close to the seabed. And they had landed on a cold water coral reef. Now, in our storytelling sessions, we have mats that they sit on the floor. And under these mats is this. So we have this printed out in a huge thing on the floor. You can also do it in A3 styles, but we do it as a big, huge one on the floor. And what they do is we lift up the mat as he reaches the seabed and expose this underwater coral reef that is now on the floor. They're sitting on it. They're in the coral reef. And we bring the lights up a little bit and we get them to explore the coral reef. So they're moving around, looking at all the different creatures on the floor, seeing what they can find. And in the middle of our coral reef, you'll never guess what they find: the bracelet. So we've hidden it on the ground there under the mats. And so this is another good way of getting them up and moving about and looking at all the different creatures here. And we give them some time to just explore this area and find the bracelet as well. So Charlie found the bracelet. So they found the bracelet for them. And this is all amazing, but it's probably about time that we start heading to the surface because we are going to run out of oxygen soon. So what we have to do is we have to tug on our rope to let them know we are coming back. So we get our rope up and ready and we do the 2 hand squeezes to let the captain know that we are coming up. And as we come up, we travel again through that sunlight layer. But as we're traveling up, our body actually releases bubbles, and that's releasing all the gas that's building up. And at this point, we switch on a bubble machine and the kids go mad for it. So we have this big bubble machine that they set off and the kids can have a little play in the immersive bubbles. And they come up all the way to the surface, back to the boat. And they take off their magic helmet, they put it back on, and they slowly go back to the house. And so Charlie managed to find the bracelet with the help of the kids. And so this story kind of ends with everyone working together, heading back to the house where Charlie can put the bracelet back into the treasure box to keep it nice and safe. So for this one, there's lots of getting up and moving around, feeling things and touching things like anemones and stuff, smelling pots and stuff. And then we also have lots of lights and noise effects in this one as well, to try and kind of immerse them into the ocean. Now, like I said, that was a bit different because I didn't have 20 kids in front of me, but I hope you got an idea of the storyline and how we incorporate the hands-on activities and multi-sensory part of it, and the theory to that story there, how we create it in a way. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask. But I'm going to give you another 5 minutes just to have a little think about your story and whether there's bits of our story that you can do. And again, just some time to take it in, because I know that I've been non-stop talking at you again for another half an hour. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes just to kind of take it all in and think of any questions, and then we'll do a quick roundup before we finish up today. So I'll be on the chat if you want me. Okay, so I hope that our story today and the ideas behind how to connect it to realizing the ambition and the curriculum for excellence were helpful. Um, it's when you start writing, it feels like quite a big thing, but once you start writing, you'll be surprised by how many ideas you have, and before you know it, you're trying to limit what you can put into it. But the idea of it being multisensory, immersive is a really good one, so that your children don't feel like you're telling them a story, they feel like they're part of it, is kind of one of the main aims that we have here. Now, I can't do a storytelling CLPL without telling you more about books that you can have. So we do have a how to adapt a storybook and add activities into it and make it more immersive coming up later on next year. But for now, we have some really good ocean books here. So I'm sure all of you have heard of the rainbow fish, which is a big one. These are a few of our other favorites here that are all about, some of them have more different issues like the little turtle, which talks about plastic pollution. And then we have other ones where they go and meet other animals in the sea. And these are really good, exciting ones, and they're really easy to buy plush toys for. And the ocean is a great theme because you can get wave noises and blue lights. Twinkle lights work really well as well. So the ocean is a really good immersive theme, and these books here are really helpful as well. And then I do have some other resources as well to help you write your own story or to do it. So we have our magnetic fishing games and the reef mat there. If you want a copy of your own reef mat, if you Google Atlas Coral Reef Mat, it will come up, and you'll be able to download it, and they have information on the animals in it as well. That's always really a great way to get kids exploring the deep sea. And then we have rock pool water troughs as well. So if you have a trough, you can fill it with water and put things like our little starfish and crabs, just little plastic toys. Or you can do it with bowls as well. We do it with bowls sometimes where they put their hand in the bowl and find things. And these are, again, more sensory things where they're putting their hand in water and actually feeling stuff as well. So you have access to those kind of troughs or bowls, they are a really good shout. And then doing mini beach cleans. Now, if you can get your kids out and about, if you're right by the beach, then it's a great idea to actually get them there. If you can't, due to health and safety or location, what we do here at Dynamic Earth is we have big tubs that we fill with sand, and in that we put bits of clean plastic and other kind of creatures and stuff so that they can then use a little mini sieve to clean their own beach as well. And this, again, is another really interactive idea that you can incorporate into your stories. And then there's a few online stuff there if you want a little bit more background knowledge and some more activity ideas. National Geographic is a really good one. The Schmidt Ocean Institute and Monterey Bay Aquarium, especially for deep sea stuff. They have some very cool footage as well. And then we have our very own online Dynamic Earth Online that you can look at as well. So don't feel like you have to come up with all these activities. I'm sure you're all very busy already. So just look up activities online. There's loads of them that you can take and put into your stories. And there's lots of things that you can adapt as well. So just keep it simple and keep it sensory are really kind of the key points here that you can have. Now, I have just spoken to you for a very long time, so I hope that the information we gave you today was helpful. Again, thank you to Dr. Joanne Vad for her insight into her work and a little bit of passion there into the ocean. Who knows, you might have some ocean lovers in your classes, your pupils and your nurseries. I know that here in Scotland it's hard to resist the ocean, so hopefully you'll be able to really inspire them with some stories about the oceans and some activities as well. So thank you all for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to talk to you about the sea and storytelling. And I really hope that you can take some of our practice today back to your kids and give them prepare them for the future that is ahead of them in a fun, interactive way. So if you do have any questions, I can stay on for a few more minutes. If not, thank you again, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Thank you so much.